Good afternoon. Don't you just love a good story of survival where truth is stranger than fiction? This is the remarkable story of Violet Constance Jessop. And it's hard to believe that this story is actually true. And it has so many connections to Belfast and to the Titanic and whatnot that I thought you should hear it. Violet Constance Jessop was born in 1887. She died in 1971, aged 83. She was born in Argentina, and she was the oldest daughter of Irish immigrants, and she was the oldest of 9 children. So she took a lot of time helping her mother rear those children. But early in her life, she herself suffered and survived from tuberculosis. Later on, whenever she was 16, the family returned to England, and their father had died. So circumstances had changed and they needed to get back to England. And again, Violet worked looking after the family while her mother was a ship stewardess. She followed her mother into that career, and by the age of 21, she was and that was 1908, she was on the Royal Mail Line ship Orinoco. By 1911, she had progressed on to the RMS Olympic, built in Belfast. And in September of 1911, the Olympic collided with the HMS Hawke off Southampton. Now, good enough, no one was killed. But substantial damage was done. And I have done a video on the HMS Hawke because later on, 1914, the HMS Hawke wasn't so fortunate because it was hit by a torpedo, and only 70 out of its crew of 524 souls were saved. And a number of those guys who went down with the ship came from the Belfast Donegal Road. At least 5 of them did. And there's a memorial plaque and picture up there to those guys. And that's what my video is talking about. But back to Violet, or as she became known and nicknamed, Miss Unsinkable. By 1912, Violet had moved on, and she was 24, and she had moved on to the RMS Titanic. And 4 days out, 14th of April 1912, the Titanic, as we know, struck an iceberg. And the ship was going down. Violet was ordered into lifeboat number 16. She was handed a baby, and she survived. The ship was rescued by the RMS Carpathia, and Violet and the rest of the folks made it to New York. Violet continued on with her stewardess work. She returned to Southampton, and by 1916 she was working for the British Red Cross on board HMS Britannic, which was a hospital ship, and they were in the Mediterranean. Unfortunately, they hit a sea mine, laid presumably by the Germans, and this was off Greece. 30 people died out of 1066, and Violet was one of those saved, but she very nearly lost her life because the lifeboat that she was in was being pulled towards the still turning propellers of the Britannic, and Violet was forced to jump out of the lifeboat, and she sustained head injuries, but she did survive. By 1920, Violet, undeterred, was back with White Star Line, and then moved to Red Star Line, and then the Royal Mail Line, and she had no, you'll be glad to hear, she had no more near-death experiences. By 1950, she had retired and she was 63, and she was sitting at home one evening whenever the telephone went, and the voice on the other end asked her had she been the one to receive a baby off the Titanic, and she said she was, and the voice said, "I was that child," and then the line went dead. So Violet's biographer said, you know, it's possibly children of the village, it's just a stunt. But Violet shook her head and said no. She had told that story at that time to no one. 1971, Violet died of congestive heart failure, and she was aged 83. And this is a photograph of the HMS Hawke that was torpedoed by the Germans in 1914 with the loss of around about 400 men, some of them coming from Belfast. And this was the ship, you remember, that ran into the Olympic in the Solent. 1958 was an interesting year for Violet because she and another lady who had served on the Titanic attended the premiere of the film Night to Remember. You know, I'm probably sitting in the audience saying, we were on that ship. And Violet again, you know, adding to this, she was immortalised in a number of films. The Night to Remember was one in 1958. 1997 was the Titanic film blockbuster. And 2000 was the Britannic film. And then in 2006 was Shadow Divers, sort of a documentary on the Britannic. And Violet's character, the person playing Violet, was in each of those films. And their actions and their words were copied from the real life story of Violet Jessop. Again, her character turns up in a 100-year commemoration of the Titanic going down. That play was put on in 2012, and the play was called Iceberg Right Ahead, and Jessop's character is in that as well. She's also in the 2020 film called The Deep. Jessop again turns up as a secondary character, so she's sort of been immortalised. And this is the book written around Violet Jessop's story, by John Maxtone Graham. This is Violet Constance Jessop's grave. I don't know whether you can read this or not, but I'll put it on anywhere. She's a remarkably good looking girl. In fact, she was told to dress down in her position as stewardess because she was so attractive. She spoke with an Irish accent. She had Irish parents. She worked with the Olympic and the Titanic and the White Star Line, so she has big connections to Belfast. Her ship, the Olympic, was in a collision with the Hawke. and I have videoed the Hawke, as I say, so there's a connection there. And her story is a remarkable story of survival, and because of that, she is gone but not forgotten. Wonderful story. As I say, truth is often stranger than fiction, and I love this, and I think she should be remembered. She's buried in Suffolk, and she's in the Hartest Cemetery, Hartest, Suffolk, England. And I would love to go and visit her grave and pay my respects. Remarkable lady. But she probably thought that she wasn't anything special.